Morning.
Good morning.
So I chose the passage by Mark Nepo that Karen read because it's all too familiar and resonates deeply with me. I used to be a chronic worrier. I constantly imagined the what ifs, and those what ifs were almost always negative. I spent tons of energy and hours imagining possibilities that usually never came true. I would hold imaginary conversations in my head, developing my arguments to counteract the imagined arguments of the person I was expecting to argue with. When doing this, I would get just as anxious as if I was talking to the person. My body would react as if I was actually in the situation I was imagining. And the kicker was that most of these conversations never happened in real life. Anxiety about work plagued me. If I had an upcoming meeting, no matter how big or small, I would get stressed and expect the worst to happen. I would worry that the meeting would go badly, that I wouldn't be able to answer the questions asked of me, that I would make mistakes and I would look stupid. For 15 years, I had the same boss who I got along well with and who respected me and my work. We worked from home offices, and I had a phone meeting with my boss every week, once a week, to check in. And every single week I would worry about that phone call and had the sinking feeling that I was going to get fired. For 15 years. It was exhausting. Now today I can see this pattern of expecting the worst stretching all the way back to my childhood. My maiden name was Young, and I grew up with what my family called the young luck. It was our version of Murphy's Law. If things could go wrong for us, they would. If something bad happened, it was at least partially due to the fact that that's just the way things went for us Youngs. Bad luck was our family curse. Then one day, in a therapy session, I was talking with my therapist about an upcoming meeting and all of the stress I was experiencing over it, because I just knew things were somehow going to go sideways, even though reality had proven over and over that this wasn't likely to happen. And she said something that seems pretty apparent now and kind of basic, but was actually a major epiphany for me. She said, what if instead of imagining the worst, you allow yourself to imagine the best? What if you allow yourself to think about the meeting going well and what that would look like and feel like? I sat in silence as I processed what she said and realized that for the first 40 years of my life, it never really occurred to me when I was caught up in this anxiety that I could instead imagine the possibility of things going well, that I could tell myself a different story, because that's what it was, a story that I learned from my mom and dad. It was a family myth that was repeated so often that I had come to mistakenly believe it was fact. When I realized this, we began working to create a more empowering story for myself, and my thinking and my life began to change. Stories are powerful things. They help us make meaning of the world around us and the things that happen to us. They provide structure and direction as they make sense of the chaos around us, and they help us navigate our way through life. They create our reality, and as author and renowned performance psychologist Jim Lair says in his book, The Power of Story, our destiny follows our stories. Story is everywhere. From very early on, each of us is spinning and telling multiple stories about our lives. You have a story about your family, your job. Anything that consumes our energy can be a story, even if we don't always call it that. There's the story of you and your faith, the story of you and your marriage or romantic relationships, the story of you and alcohol, or you and food, or you and anger, or you and impossibly high expectations. The story of you, the friend, of you, the son or daughter. But the most important story of all is the story you tell yourself about yourself. You might recognize the narrator of this story as your inner critic, the internal voice that comments, speculates, judges, compares, complains, likes, and dislikes. This inner dialogue is different than your intuition and is basically the never-ending stream of thoughts that relates to who we are, our capabilities, what we should or shouldn't do, how we look, and how we are perceived by others. Many of us don't question this inner critic and unconsciously let the story it weaves steer our lives and how we interact with the world. The story may tell us things like we're stupid when we make mistakes, that anything we will do will turn out to be a failure. It can talk us out of an experience because it convinces us we won't be good at what we want to do or that we might embarrass ourselves. Then we take these stories, internalize them, and repeat them, and they become ingrained habit. They become our truth and our identity. They can also become our greatest enemy, leading us to make life-limiting choices that hold us back and keep us stuck and stagnant. These negative stories can sabotage our successes and cause constant unnecessary conflict and stress in our lives. Negative self-talk about our future often leads to anxiety, while negative internal narratives about our past can lead to depression. The good news is that remarkable things can happen when we change the narrative going on in our heads. For example, when University of Virginia professors experimented with telling students with academic challenges to change the narrative in their head from "I can't do this" to "I just need to learn the ropes," they found that this alone dramatically decreased dropout rates. And in a surprising look at Navy SEAL training, the difference between the small percentage of candidates who make it through the brutal training required to become a Navy SEAL and those who don't make it isn't the size of their muscles or their overall physical fitness. It is almost entirely explained by the self-talk the candidate gives themselves when going through the training. The soldiers who turned the extreme physical challenges into games in their heads were the ones to push through and succeed. In his book, The Expectation Effect: How Your Mindset Can Change Your World, scientist David Robson focuses on the power our stories and our mind can have on our physical health. When I first read it, some of what he proposed at first seemed a little far-fetched to me, but he uses real-life, reputable studies and research to back up his claims. One of the studies he mentions is a study from Harvard University. Participants were hotel cleaners whose work is often physically intense, yet feels very different from the exercise you might perform at the gym. To change the cleaners' perceptions of their own fitness, the researchers explained that the amount of energy that was exerted by vacuuming the floor, changing the beds, or moving furniture easily amounted over the course of a week to the level of exercise recommended for good health. 1 month later, the researchers found that the cleaners' fitness had noticeably improved with significant changes in their weight and blood pressure. Amazingly, the shift in their beliefs about their bodies and their expectations of their work had brought about real physiological benefits without them making any lifestyle changes. Another study he notes shows people with a more positive attitude towards aging are less likely to develop hearing loss, frailty, illness, and even Alzheimer's disease as they get older than people who associate aging with senility and disability. Researcher Aaliyah Crum at Stanford University says that our minds aren't passive observers simply perceiving reality as it is. Our minds actually change reality. In other words, the reality we will experience tomorrow is in part a product of the mindset we hold today. Robson frames it this way: unhealthy storytelling is characterized by a diet of faulty thinking and ultimately long-term negative consequences. This undetectable but sure progression is not unlike what happens to coronary arteries from a high-fat, high-cholesterol diet. In the body, the consequences of such a diet is hardening of the arteries, among other maladies. And in the mind, the consequences of bad storytelling is the hardening of our dreams, the narrowing of possibilities, and the calcification of perception. So, how do we keep from telling ourselves negative stories or change the stories that are already part of us? Lair, based on his work with elite athletes and high-level business executives, proposes that we can write new stories for ourselves. The first step in his process is to identify and become crystal clear on your purpose. He proposes that purpose is the epicenter of everyone's life story and is one of three foundations of good storytelling. Without purpose, no character in a book or a movie would do anything interesting, meaningful, memorable, or worthwhile. Without purpose, our life story has no meaning. It has no coherence, no direction, no forward momentum. But with purpose, people do amazing things, good, smart, productive, often heroic and unprecedented things. Purpose is our ultimate mission in this life. It's the thing in our lives that we will fight for. It's the ground we will defend at any cost. It's what renews our spirit and what gets us to stop and smell the roses. It spells out the most overarching goals we want and need to achieve in our lifetime and the manner in which we feel we have to do it. Once we know our purpose, says Lehigh, then everything else can fall into place. The second foundation of storytelling is truth. We need to determine if the story we're telling, both old and new, is true. Does it conform to known facts? Is it grounded in objective reality as fully as possible? Or is it true only if we're living in a dreamland? What myths is the story perpetuating that could potentially harm us in areas of our lives that really matter? The third foundation is action. With our purpose in mind, along with a confidence about what is really true, what actions will we now take to make things better so that our ultimate purpose and our day-to-day life are better aligned? What habits do we need to eliminate? What new ones do we need to cultivate? Are our actions filled with hope? Hope that we will succeed? Hope that the changes we seek are realistically within our grasp? Do we believe to our core that in the end, our willingness to follow through with the action will determine if we are successful in life? These three foundations of storytelling can serve as a checklist when we're writing our new story. Does it have a purpose? Is it grounded in reality? Does it lead to action that stimulates genuine hope? Lehigh says that unless we can answer these three questions affirmatively, our stories will fail. In his book, The Power of Story, Lehigh goes on into further detail about how to rewrite our stories and the steps we can take to ensure our new stories become reality. And I can recommend both his book and Robson's book, The Expectation Effect, if you're interested in further exploring the power stories have in our lives and how we can change them. You have a story right now, a story that is by definition the story of your life. I encourage all of us to ask ourselves, who owns it? Who influences it? Is the story given to us by our parents, by our peers, by society? And leaving here today, I hope we'll take with us the understanding that we don't have to stay mired down in stories that aren't our own, that don't serve us, and that hold us back. We can empower ourselves with a new story that can literally change our life and by extension, change the lives of those around us. As humans, stories are our superpower. Let us use this power wisely. May it be so. And now I would like to invite you to join me in a meditative prayer, which is adapted from words by Allison Miller. And you want to close your eyes, you can, you don't have to. Put your feet on the floor and take in a few deep breaths. Let us now enter into a time of awareness within ourselves and connection beyond boundaries. Connection to one another, to that interdependent web of life of which we are but one small thread. As we breathe in, we are connected. As we breathe out, we are connected. May a spirit of love and creativity flow in us and among us and through us, so that we might become authors, one and all, of a today and a tomorrow where our faith emboldens us to embrace changes that give rise to new life, to take risks that make love visible in our world, and to celebrate every fragment of wholeness and holiness that comes our way. I want you to take a deep breath in, and as we breathe in, we are connected. And as we breathe out, we are connected. By our thoughts, by our actions, by our hearts, and by our very breath, may it be so.